there, friends, and welcome back for another Brutus Monroe video. This is Cassie. We are going to be using some products of the month, so let's talk about what we're using. This is the Stamp Club stamp. Isn't she adorable? A little unicorn in a coffee cup. How could that not make you happy? We are going to be using this Amethyst Aqua Pigment along with some others that I'm going to bring in later. Here is the stencil of the month, and isn't that beautiful? It's so flowy and beautiful, and I'm excited to try something different with that. We also have these cutting dies. These are coffee dies, and I'm going to be using a couple of those on this because they just go perfectly. And then we have some different color companion cardstocks in the color Potion and Macchiato. So let's cut down some of our cardstock. This is some watercolor cardstock that I have, and I am pulling out the stencil of the month. I want to do something a little bit different with this background. So I'm going to grab some Pixie Spray here in a second, but before I do that, I want to take some of this Amethyst Aqua Pigment and I'm going to put that into a mini mister that I have. I'm experimenting here. I don't know how much it's going to take, so I'm kind of just spritzing this into my trash can to see how that's going to come out, see if I need to add any water to it or anything like that. I do have a little bit of distilled water on my desk. And again, just kind of experimenting. I don't want to water it down too much because it's beautiful and it does have a lot of sparkle in it. And more sparkle the better, right? So here's my Pixie Spray. I'm going to take that out in a well-ventilated area, spray the back of it, bring it back so that way it'll stick nicely to my cardstock. I just want to make sure that I don't have any areas where if I spray too much that it'll seep under too much. So once I get that down and fairly centered, I'm going to start by spritzing. So I'm just going to go ahead and spritz, and I'm thinking that obviously wasn't enough. So I'm going to add a little more to it, a little more water, spritz, 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 and I'm thinking, okay, that's going to look good. So I'm going to pull the stencil away, and I'm not going to be super happy. It's something, but I'm not super excited about it. And then I thought, well, I had enough ink on my stencil, so I'll grab another piece of watercolor cardstock and flip it over, and then I move it because I had that Pixie Spray on the back. I'll dab that down, and I'm clearly not impressed with that either. So we'll set that off to the side, and we're going to try it again. So I'll wipe all that off, we'll grab another piece of watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to add more Aqua Pigment this time. So I'm adding a couple of squirts, and this, it looks like I'm adding a lot, but I'm actually adding a couple of drops of it. Like I said, I don't want to water it down too much. So now I'm going to spray, 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 and I'm going to get really liberal with it. And it's at this point I'm thinking, you know what? Before I take that off, I'm going to take the one that didn't have hardly any on it, and I'll just set that right on top in the middle. And then we'll pull that away, and ooh, doesn't that look cool? Pull the stencil away, and yes, that is what I was going for. So there are the three pieces. So now I'll have two backgrounds that I can use on something else later. I've got some more of that watercolor cardstock. I'm going to ink that up with some Raven Detail ink because that stuff is good for alcohol markers and for watercoloring, so it's great. So I'll stamp that a couple times, and then I'll pull that out of my MISTI, and I'm going to put, here are the three other colors that I grabbed: Acorn, Brown, and Lavender. That lavender has some sparkle to it, and I'm just going to put a couple of drops on my glass mat, and then we'll start painting. Now, if you've watched me watercolor before, I've often said that watercolor works best in layers, so I'm just putting down my first layer, and this first layer is the Acorn color. It's like a beautiful brown, you know, chestnutty, beautiful brown color. I love that. And I do have a little bit of brown, so I'm going to grab some of that while this is still wet, and I'll put a little bit of that brown on there, hoping that it will kind of let the liquid of the Aqua Pigment do some of the work. My paintbrush is actually pretty dry. I only dipped it in the water that I had, just was clean, clear water, just to kind of pick up a little bit of water. I didn't want a soaking wet brush because I didn't heat emboss this, so I do need to be a little bit careful because anywhere that I touch that paint where it's still wet, it could seep into each other. Now I'm grabbing the Amethyst, and I'm going to put down my first wash of color. And like I said, this stuff, I mean, seeing it on camera just doesn't do it justice. It has this beautiful, beautiful shimmer to it, and I love it. So we're just going to cover the coffee mug with all the colors. We'll now wash off our brush and come in with that lavender on the little unicorn's nose and then the hooves. And then I'm going to heat set this in between so that way I can bring in my next color. because this way I can work in layers. And I'm actually just layering the same colors on top of each other. So once again, grab that Amethyst, put that down on the cup, and then we'll move on to all of our colors and basically just color this way and dry in between any layers we might need to do. She's just such a cute little image, and obviously I love the theme of this month, coffee. You could call it tea as well, which would be my preference, as you all know. All right, work down to her muzzle, add a little bit more to her hooves, and then I'm even going to come in with just a little bit more of that Amethyst just to deepen it up just a little bit more, since that's a lot of surface area. And I just love the harsh shadows that it ends up giving. It's just really cool. And then I'll heat set that after I'm done, but I'm going to do some splatter of the Amethyst. I don't know why, I just decided to. I thought it would end up being nice and dark. You really can't tell. I set all that stuff off to the side to dry. I did fussy cut out my unicorn once she was dry, and now I've got some of that Macchiato cardstock along with a couple of the dies. I'm going to grab out the word coffee, and then I'm going to grab out the little heart coffee bean, which is so, so cute. And I'm going to cut this out 3 times for each. So we're going to have 3 coffees and 3 little hearts, and I'm going to attach all 3 of the coffees on top of each other. I'm using my reverse tweezers and just a little bit of liquid glue, and then this will give them a little bit more of a chipboard look. I'm not going to do that with my coffee beans, and I will leave those nice and intact. So there are pieces that'll come out of the center, but I left those alone. I've got my foundations, my rectangle foundations die, and I'm going to cut out a couple of rectangles because I want to make this a gatefold card. You'll see where we're headed here. I'm going to use those 2 rectangles. So for the first one, I decided I was going to take the 2 little coffee bean stamps that are with the Stamp Club stamp, and I'll stamp that all over my potion cardstock using some triple berry ink. So I'm just randomly stamping that all over that background just to give it a little something. And it kind of blends in there nicely. It's not too like in your face. I'm not going to do that with the bottom one because with that one I want to stamp my sentiment on there. So the sentiment that comes with this stamp says, "Life happens, coffee helps." Well, I only want parts of it. So I'm going to mask off the "Life happens." I'm using the little rainbow tape dispenser that Brutus Monroe carries. So I just put that over the words I didn't want, peeled that off. I'll stamp that down in the upper left-hand corner. And then I'll cover that with some Alabaster embossing powder. If there's any stray powder, I can push that away with a dry flat brush. And then I'm going to heat set that with my heat tool, just making sure that's good and melted. And then I want helps. That's the only word I want at the bottom because I have the word coffee already. We're going to just kind of jazz this sentiment up a little bit. So I'll do the same process, cover up the words I don't want, stamp out helps in the bottom right-hand corner, cover that with the Alabaster embossing powder, brush away any excess powder, and then heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And then the word coffee that we die cut out 3 times is going to fit beautifully right in between. I do need to trim this panel down. Originally it was 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, but I'm making a gatefold card, and I want there to be some edges around the side, so I just cut off about 1/8 of an inch around all the sides. I did it that way because I wanted this to be fairly centered, so now I can just cut that in half, like 2 inches, because it's 4 inches by 5 1/4 now. I'm using some more potion cardstock, and I'm going to score that at 2 1/8 on each side, and then I can fold that in and they'll meet in the center. So gatefolds are some of my favorite because they're super easy. And then I can take my 2 panels and I can just glue those right down on top, and I want them to meet in the center so it looks like one cohesive piece. But you do have a little bit of a border of that potion cardstock all the way around. And I like the combination of those 2 purple colors. I'm going to have my layers overlap, or my rectangles overlap the layers. And so we'll use some liquid glue to adhere those down. I don't obviously want to put glue all over that because otherwise it will close the card and we don't want that. So I just put some on one area, flipped it over, and then I can attach down, kind of trying to make it straight. I'll let that dry a little bit before I cut that off, and then I'll attach down my bottom one. And that one overlaps as well. So it's kind of neat the way they fold in together. And then I'm going to put this into my guillotine trimmer and trim off the excess. I did put some foam tape on the back of our cute little unicorn, And then I'm going to pop her up on her panel. And then I'm going to use some liquid glue on the word coffee. But I think, yeah, I'm going to put the coffee beans down first, I guess. So I'll put the coffee beans down. It's kind of neat because the little pieces stayed in the center. You could very easily cut those out, but I do like that it gives some texture to these little die cut pieces. They're just adorable. And now I'm going to glue down the word coffee. But I don't want to stop there. I'm going to add a little something on the inside. I decide to take the stamp, our main stamp, and I'm going to stamp her right on the inside using that triple berry ink. So it's not a lot, but it's a little something. When you open up the card, you'll see her. And I just am so happy with how this turned out. So there she is, all finished. So if you liked this card, please hit that like button. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.